December 26, 1944. A telephone rings in Supreme Headquarters. General Eisenhower picks it up, and what he hears makes his hands shake. 4 words. Just 4 words that saved 10,000 American soldiers from certain death. This is the story of what Eisenhower said when George Patton did the impossible. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll understand why this moment changed everything. Let me paint you a picture. It's December 19, 1944. The war in Europe is supposed to be winding down. Everyone thinks Germany is on its last legs. But then, chaos. The Germans launch a massive surprise attack through the Ardennes forest. It's their last desperate gamble, and it's working. They punch a huge hole in the American lines. Entire units are overrun. Some just vanish in the confusion. And right in the middle of this disaster sits a small Belgian town that most Americans can't even pronounce, Bastogne. Inside Bastogne, the 101st Airborne Division. The Screaming Eagles. These aren't just any soldiers. These are the guys who jumped into Normandy on D-Day. They're elite. They're heroes. And now they're completely surrounded. Let me tell you how bad it was. 10,000 men. Encircled by German forces that outnumber them several to 1. They're running out of ammunition. They're rationing bullets. Medical supplies. Almost gone. Wounded soldiers are lying in frozen basements with no bandages, no morphine, nothing. German tanks are closing in from every direction. And the weather? It's so bad that Allied planes can't fly. No air support. No supply drops. No help coming from the sky. Adolf Hitler himself has given the order, destroy the 101st Airborne completely. Not capture them. Annihilate them. Every expert looking at the situation comes to the same conclusion, those paratroopers are doomed. Now picture Eisenhower in the Situation Room at Supreme Headquarters. This man carries the weight of the entire Western Front on his shoulders. He's been awake more than he's been asleep since the German attack began. Maps cover every surface. Colored pins and arrows show the nightmare unfolding. An intelligence officer gives him the cold, hard facts about Bastogne. Eisenhower asks the only question that matters, how long can they hold? The officer hesitates. Because he knows his answer isn't just information. It's a death sentence. Sir, he finally says, realistically, 4 or 5 days. Maybe a week if everything goes their way. After that, they'll be out of ammunition. The Germans will overwhelm them. Think about that for a second. 4 or 5 days. That's all the time those 10,000 men have left. Eisenhower's jaw tightens. Because he knows what losing the 101st Airborne means. Militarily, it removes an elite fighting force from the board. Psychologically, it's devastating. These men are living symbols of American courage. Their destruction would echo far beyond the frozen woods of Belgium. It would be a propaganda victory for Hitler. It would shake American morale. It might even change how the Allies approach the rest of the war. Eisenhower looks at the map and asks, what options do we have to relieve them? The answers are bleak. British forces under Montgomery are holding the northern part of the German advance, but they can't pivot south quickly enough. Other American armies are desperately fighting just to hold their own lines. Nobody has the troops, the fuel, the position, and the time to launch a counterattack toward Bastogne. Nobody except one army. Third Army. Far to the south. Currently fighting in a completely different sector. And Third Army means one man, George S. Patton. Here's the thing you need to understand about the relationship between Eisenhower and Patton. It's complicated. Patton is brilliant. He's a battlefield genius. He can see maneuvers other generals can't even imagine. When Patton's tanks start rolling, they don't stop. But he's also volatile. He says controversial things. He creates political fires. He's impulsive. For years, Eisenhower has defended him, reprimanded him, shielded him from consequences, and seriously considered firing him more than once. Managing George Patton is like trying to harness lightning. It's exhausting. But now, staring at that map with the black circle around Bastogne, Eisenhower realizes something. He doesn't need a polite, easily managed general. He needs lightning. Get me Patton, Eisenhower orders. Tell him I want him in Verdun tomorrow for an emergency conference. And tell him to bring plans for offensive operations. He pauses, then adds quietly, he'll know what that means. After everyone leaves, Eisenhower is alone in the dim Situation Room. His aide later recorded that he heard Eisenhower talking to himself, almost pleading. George, for once in this damned war, do exactly what I need you to do. Those paratroopers are counting on you. America is counting on you. I am counting on you. Do not let me down. This is the moment when everything hangs in the balance. The next day, December 19th, the meeting at Verdun becomes the stuff of legend. The room is packed with generals responsible for the entire Western Front. The atmosphere is tense. Everyone knows they're facing the biggest crisis since D-Day. Eisenhower opens with a brave face, telling them to see this as an opportunity, not a disaster. But everyone knows better. This is a crisis. Then Eisenhower lays it out clearly. The Germans have exposed their flanks. If the Allies can move quickly, they can trap the German offensive. But Bastogne has to hold. If it falls, the Germans can drive deeper and split the Allied front in half. Eisenhower looks around the table. I want each of you to think carefully before answering, he says. How soon can you launch an offensive to relieve Bastogne? Most commanders start doing mental math. Divisions available. Roads. Fuel. Ammunition. How long to redeploy units? Days. Maybe weeks. Nobody wants to promise something they can't deliver. Then George Patton speaks. I can attack on the 22nd, he says calmly. With 3 divisions. The room goes completely silent. People stare at him. Some think he's bluffing. Some think he's crazy. Because what Patton just promised is, by any normal standard, impossible. To relieve Bastogne, Third Army would have to disengage from active combat, turn 90 degrees north, drive roughly 100 miles through snow and ice, attack into the side of a German offensive. In 3 days. 3 days. Eisenhower doesn't smile. He fixes his eyes on Patton and speaks slowly. Every word carries weight. George, I am not asking for optimism. I am not asking what might be theoretically possible on a map. I am asking what you can actually accomplish. Truly. He leans forward. The lives of 10,000 American soldiers depend on your answer. The men of the 101st Airborne are surrounded, outnumbered, running out of everything. If you say you will be there and you are not, they die. All of them. The room is so quiet you could hear a pin drop. I will ask again, Eisenhower says. Can you attack on the 22nd of December? Patton doesn't flinch. Ike, he replies, I already have 3 plans. My staff has anticipated this possibility. We've wargamed 3 separate contingencies for turning north. On the 22nd, my 4th Armored Division will be attacking toward Bastogne. That's not a guess. It's not a hope. It's a fact. Eisenhower searches his face. Looking for bluff. Looking for bravado. Instead, he sees something rare in Patton, complete, hard-edged certainty. Very well, George, Eisenhower says at last. You have your mission. Relieve Bastogne. You have full operational freedom to execute as you see fit. Then his tone changes. Everyone in the room feels it. But understand this. If you fail, if those paratroopers die because you did not deliver what you promised, I will personally see that you never command troops again. Not just relieved from Third Army. Finished. Am I clear? Crystal clear, sir, Patton answers. I will not fail. Later, Eisenhower pulls his chief of staff aside. Do you think George can really do it? He asks. It sounds impossible, the chief of staff replies. Eisenhower nods slowly. That's why I'm sending Patton. Impossible is what he does. What happens next is one of the most remarkable military operations in history. While Patton's staff frantically issues orders, reroutes traffic, and turns entire divisions around on snow-clogged roads, Eisenhower watches from headquarters. He's living hour to hour on scraps of news from Bastogne. And the news is grim. German artillery pounds American positions day and night. Infantry presses closer. Tanks mass for another assault. Ammunition dwindles with every fire mission. The 101 ST's acting commander, General Anthony McAuliffe, receives a written demand from the Germans: surrender or face annihilation. McAuliffe scribbles a one-word reply that becomes famous: nuts. When Eisenhower reads that report, a tired smile crosses his face. At least their spirit isn't broken, he tells his staff. But spirit alone can't stop shells or bullets. Patton has to get there. December 22 arrives. As promised, Third Army begins attacking northward. They run into everything winter and the German army can throw at them. Ice-slick roads. Blown bridges. Ambushes. Anti-tank guns. Determined German defenders. The advance is slower than anyone hoped. At Bastogne, the situation gets worse. Units are down to a handful of rounds per rifle. Some artillery batteries have so little ammunition that every shot has to count. Wounded men lie on cold floors. Frostbitten sentries stare into blowing snow, knowing that somewhere out there, more German troops are preparing to attack. Eisenhower sends a message to McAuliffe: hold at all costs. Relief is on the way. But in his private notes, he admits the terrible truth: he's gambled everything on Patton. If Third Army doesn't break through, Bastogne will fall. And the blame will be his. December 23. The sky finally clears enough for planes to fly. C-47 transport aircraft roar in at low altitude, dropping bundles of ammunition, medical supplies, and food. Paratroopers watch the parachutes bloom above them like salvation. It buys time. But not much. Hitler has ordered Bastogne taken at any cost. He sees it as more than a tactical objective. It's a symbol. Crushing the American paratroopers there would prove Germany can still win. Eisenhower sends urgent messages to Patton: George, I need maximum effort. The 101st cannot hold much longer. Whatever you're doing, do it faster. Christmas Eve, December 24. Eisenhower attends a chapel service. He tries to close his eyes and listen to hymns about peace. But all he can think about are the men fighting and dying in the snow. Between hymns, he keeps glancing toward the door, waiting for updates. Reports from Patton's spearheads are cautiously optimistic, but still not a breakthrough. They're fighting closer. But Bastogne remains surrounded. That night, Eisenhower sits at his desk. He starts drafting letters he prays he'll never send. Letters to the families of men in the 101st, letters of condolence. An aide finds him late that night, surrounded by half-finished letters. Eisenhower looks up and says quietly, I hope to God I don't have to sign these. Christmas Day, December 25. It should be a day of carols and joy. For Eisenhower, it's a day of gnawing anxiety. He checks messages constantly. During church. After church. Into the night. Still no definitive word. Third Army is closing in. The 101st is still holding. Still surrounded. The margin for error has shrunk to almost nothing. December 26, 1944. Late afternoon. 10 minutes before 5 p.m. The telephone on Eisenhower's desk rings. His aide answers, listens, then turns with an expression that makes everyone freeze. "Sir," he says, "it's General Patton." He says it's urgent. Eisenhower grabs the receiver. Patton's voice comes over the line, crackling with distance and relief. "Ike, we're through." 4 words. 4th Armored made contact with the 101st at 1650 hours. The corridor is narrow, but it's open. We're pushing supplies and reinforcements through now. Bastogne is relieved. For a heartbeat, maybe 2, Eisenhower says nothing. The men watching him see his shoulders sag. Like a physical weight has lifted. His hand tightens around the phone, knuckles white. "George," he says at last, his voice unsteady. "Say that again." "We're through to Bastogne," Patton repeats. "The Screaming Eagles are safe. They're beaten up, but they held. We got there in time." Eisenhower's answer is thick with emotion. "George, I thank God. Thank you. You did it. You saved them." Patton, never comfortable with sentiment, tries to deflect. "Just doing my job, Ike. Those paratroopers did the real work. We just opened the door." But Eisenhower won't let him diminish it. "No, George. Don't undersell this. You turned an entire army in a blizzard and broke through in 4 days. That's not just doing your job. That's why you're indispensable. Difficult as hell, but indispensable." After the call ends, Eisenhower remains standing, staring at the map where a thin line now connects 3rd Army to Bastogne. Witnesses later recall that his eyes are wet. And he doesn't bother to hide it. "Gentlemen," he says to his staff, "General Patton has just accomplished something I will remember as long as I live. He saved 10,000 American soldiers who were hours, perhaps minutes, from annihilation. He did what I asked him to do, when I asked him to do it, against odds everyone said were impossible." He pauses. "George S. Patton is the most difficult subordinate I have ever had. He is also, beyond question, one of the finest battlefield commanders this country has pro." Messages fly out from headquarters. Official congratulations to the 101st Airborne for their stubborn defense. Commendations to 3rd Army for their rapid relief operation. Reports to Washington that Bastogne has been held and the German offensive blunted. But Eisenhower also sits down and writes something more personal. A telegram directly to Patton. "George, words cannot adequately express my gratitude and admiration for what 3rd Army has accomplished. You gave your word that you would be there. You kept that word. In doing so, you saved not only 10,000 soldiers, but potentially the entire Ardennes campaign. Well done," does not begin to cover it. This operation will be studied for generations as an example of operational genius. I am proud to have you under my command. Ike. Later that evening, an aide finds Eisenhower alone again, looking at the map. The line to Bastogne is now secured, reinforced, widened. Eisenhower traces it with one finger and says quietly, almost to himself. "For more hours." That's all he had. For more hours and the 101st would have been overrun. He made it with 4 hours to spare. He shakes his head. 4 hours between salvation and annihilation. In the days that follow, Eisenhower's private comments reveal his true feelings. To General George Marshall, the Army Chief of Staff in Washington, he writes frankly. "George Patton has just saved my command. Had Bastogne fallen with an entire airborne division destroyed, the psychological impact would have been catastrophic. Questions would have been raised about our strategy, our competence, and my leadership. Patton prevented that disaster. Whatever difficulties I have had with him, and they are many, this operation alone justifies every painful decision I've made to keep him in command." In his diary, Eisenhower is even more candid. "There have been times when I wanted to relieve him and be done with it. Times when I doubted whether he was worth the constant supervision and the political trouble. Bastogne answered that question. He is worth every frustration, every angry conversation, because when it mattered most, when 10,000 men were on the brink, George delivered. Not eventually. Not late. Exactly when and how he said he would. That is the mark of a great commander. On January 2, 1945, Eisenhower sends another letter to Patton. George, I have had time to reflect. What you accomplished goes beyond tactical brilliance. You gave hope to men who had every reason to believe they were abandoned. You proved that American forces could execute complex, high-speed operations under the worst possible conditions. You changed German perceptions of what we are capable of. Most importantly, you saved lives. Not in theory, but in concrete reality. Every man of the 101st who returns to his family after this war owes a part of that to your speed and aggression. That is a legacy greater than any medal. Years later, when writing his memoir, Crusade in Europe, Eisenhower devotes a full chapter to the Bastogne episode. He describes Patton's relief of the town as one of the pivotal moments of the Western campaign. He highlights the extraordinary speed with which Third Army disengaged, pivoted, and attacked. He writes that in military history, such movements are often discussed in staff colleges as theoretical exercises. At Bastogne, they became reality. In an interview given in the mid-1960s, not long before his death, Eisenhower is asked to name the most agonizing command decision he made during the war. He doesn't mention D-Day. He doesn't mention choosing which beaches to storm. He doesn't name the appointment of commanders. He says, trusting George Patton to relieve Bastogne. It was a gamble of the highest order, he explains. I was wagering the lives of 10,000 paratroopers, the stability of our entire position, on a man who had often been difficult to control. But I also knew he was the only one who could do it in the time we had. He pauses, remembering. When that phone call came, we're through to Bastogne, I felt a relief and gratitude I still cannot fully describe. Those 4 words may have been the most important 4 I heard during the entire war. In his final reflections, Eisenhower sums up the paradox of Patton. Many generals from that war will be remembered. Some for careful planning. Some for political skill. Some for steady competence. But only a few will be remembered for saving an entire division from destruction through sheer operational daring. That was Patton at Bastogne. Difficult. Flawed. Controversial. But also the man who refused to accept that 10,000 Americans were doomed. He gave his word that he would reach them. And he did. The relief of Bastogne was more than just a military maneuver on a winter map. It was the moment when a commander's faith in a difficult genius paid off. When a wild talent proved that sometimes the most troublesome people are the ones who pull off miracles others consider impossible. It was the intersection of stubborn courage in the foxholes and audacious decision-making in the command posts. All balanced on the edge of a phone line and a clock ticking down to 0. Think about what Eisenhower did. He took a massive risk. He bet everything on the one general everyone said was too difficult to manage. He put his own career, his reputation, and the lives of 10,000 men on the line. And when Patton delivered, when those 4 words came through, we're through to Bastogne, Eisenhower didn't just feel relief. He felt gratitude. Deep, profound gratitude. Because leadership isn't about surrounding yourself with easy people. It's about recognizing talent, even when that talent comes wrapped in difficulty. It's about knowing when to trust someone, even when that trust feels dangerous. It's about understanding that the person who drives you crazy might be the exact person you need when everything is on the line. Eisenhower could have chosen a safer option. He could have waited for a more conventional solution. He could have played it safe. But he didn't. He chose Patton. He chose lightning. And because of that choice, 10,000 men came home. That's what Eisenhower said when Patton saved the 101st Airborne. Not just, thank you. Not just, well done. He said, you are indispensable. Difficult as hell, but indispensable. And in those words, you can hear everything. The frustration. The respect. The gratitude. The truth. Sometimes the most difficult people are exactly who you need. Sometimes impossible is just what certain people do. And sometimes, 4 words can save 10,000 lives.